Hello, my name is Justin, and I am an addict. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober, one day at a time, since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to the RICO 12 speaker meeting. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust and sex, food and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. In order to ask questions, and if you are here live, please do so by typing them into the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you are hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, or if you would like to become a guest speaker in a future meeting, and we're filling dates out into August right now, so that's really cool for those speakers, please go to RICO12.com, RECO12.com to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations or to become a future guest speaker. And we may have some exciting things coming up in regards to that also. Since we're booked so far out, we're considering a few things. So RICO 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping it that way. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the costs of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to RICO12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal that I'll put in the chat of the live meeting and in the show notes of the podcast. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 42. Now, last week's meeting was with Heston C., and he spoke on hope. It was a very good talk, and if you don't wear mismatched socks on purpose now, you may consider doing it after listening to his talk. If you missed hearing that powerful meeting or any other meeting we have done, you can listen to them in podcast form by searching for RICO 12 Speaker Meeting Podcast on virtually any podcast platform that you use. Or you can go to the RICO 12 website and find it under the link podcast. If you find value in RICO 12, please take a moment to go to the podcast platform of your choosing and leave a rating and review. Also, please feel free to share this with any of your recovery network that may benefit from it. It helps us work our 12th step by carrying the message to recovery to more addicts who suffer. All right, one more word about our speakers before we introduce today's speaker, which I'm really excited about. When we line up a speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in each of us, the listening audience. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Rivkah R., whose topic of choice is "The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it." Now, here's a little bit about Rivkah. Rivkah has been thriving in many fellowships for 3 years. They have a sponsor, they actively sponsor others, and they're passionate about being of service to their fellow BIPOC and LGBTQ plus fellows in recovery. Their favorite 12-step joke is, if you're ever struggling, read the first 3 words on page 112 of the big book, which, by the way, are "read this book." Take it away, Rivkah. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you. My name is Rivkah. I am an alcoholic and a multidisciplinary addict in many fellowships, which include AA, SLAA. I sometimes go to CA meetings, which is Cocaine Anonymous. I have checked out ACA, Al-Anon. I think out of the addictive behaviors that I know about, the one that I don't do is gamble. And I feel that if I did gamble, I would definitely be addicted to it. So yeah, you name it, I got it. My sobriety date from alcohol is December 10th, 2017. My sobriety date from all other mind-altering substances is January 7th, 2019. And my date that I entered the program is 3/10/2018. And I say those 3 different dates because they're all very different parts of my journey in this program. But I was half measuring it, is basically the gist of it. For the first few years of my being in SLAA and AA, I was just half measuring it. I was not working the steps. I was going to the meetings. I had a sponsor, but I wasn't working the steps. And it left me in what I like to call sobriety, where I'm in the rooms, I'm not drinking, I'm not acting out, but I'm dry. Because I'm not working the steps. I'm not relying on God. So, now I've got two incredible sponsors, both of whom know where I am. My SLA sponsor definitely knows I'm here right now. And my AA sponsor probably doesn't know exactly where I am at this moment, but she does know where I am spiritually. And I think that's more important than, her knowing where I am mentally. So yeah, just a brief what it was like. I was using people, places, and things to escape Rivkah. I was using anything I could get my hands on, drugs, alcohol, sex, relationships, emotions, money, no money, food, no food, to get that itch scratched. And then when that stopped working, I turned to harder drugs and even less food and, even more toxic, destructive relationships. And I bottomed out. And, after my first bottom, which was in February of 2017, I started doing the controlled using and controlled drinking method and the controlled acting out method with no program, even though I had friends in program who were kind of saving me a seat without saying they were, because they were following tradition. Then after some time, I had an on my knees moment of knowing I needed help and, being very close to death. And, every time I would look into the mirror when I was drunk or high, I would see this person that I didn't know, this person who was dying, and I started just saying, I need help. And I think that those three words are magic. I think something truly divine happens when we are willing to surrender like that and say, I need help. And I had been researching SLAA meetings because at that point I had been, dry drunk, still using weed, still like once I think I, in the 3 months before I came into program after stopping drinking, I think I did coke like a couple times without being drunk. And like, that wasn't fun. And I finally, had been Googling SLAA and AA meetings nearby for a couple months. And then I had had enough. I was, having an affair with a married woman and, ruining a marriage, ruining my nasal passages, ruining every aspect of my life. My body was just tired. And I had had enough. And I went to my first SLAA meeting on March 10th of 2018. And I went into the room and the chairperson, I think, clocked that I was a newcomer. And she was like, are you new? And I had this like moment where I was going to lie and say no. And then I had this gut drop that was like, you probably shouldn't lie to this person. And now I know that gut drop was God, my higher power, which I choose to call God because it's a 3-letter monosyllabic word that means many, many things. There are many acronyms for it. My favorite is grow or die. But then other ones that I like, the one that got me in the room was gift of desperation, right? There's good, orderly direction. There's grace over destruction, go outdoors, and also God spelled backward is dog. And I do think that there is something quite godly about animals. And when I first came into program, I came into AA about a week and a half after I came into SLA because people in SLA were telling me that I was an alcoholic. And I was just like, I agree. And I started going to AA meetings, and I got a sponsor who, her first instruction to me before we even started step one was every morning when you wake up, read pages 86 to 88 of the big book, starting with On Awakening, which, that is one of the only things that I've done pretty much close to perfectly every day since I've, come into program is read On Awakening, or at least now that I've read it so many times, I've got it kind of memorized. So I'll just go in my mind and visualize those words on the page, those conditions that allow me and my thought life to be placed on a higher plane because my thinking is cleared of wrong motives. So On Awakening, before I make my coffee, before I do my skincare routine, before I pull my tarot card for the day, I think about the 24 hours ahead and I consider my plans for the day. And before I begin anything, not just before I begin my day, but before I begin anything, before I go on a date, before I open Instagram, before I, go outside for a walk, I ask my higher power to direct my thinking, especially asking that it be divorced, because Rivkah is married to self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. And under those conditions, I can employ my mental faculties, which I love the word faculty there because I imagine it's just like a staff of like liars in my brain. And I can employ them and say, okay, like liar number one, you're going to go take care, you're going to go be patient today. Liar number two, you're going to be tolerant today. and focus on all of those spiritual principles that the big book, say that we'll feel a lot better if we are these things: patient, tolerant, honest, etc. And I thought it was kind of weird that my sponsor, when I was brand new, was, asking me to read those pages because I wasn't even on step 11 yet. And she was like, well, it's never too early to pray and it's never too early to meditate. You can meditate at any point in your recovery. So I took that instruction. Also, she said that her sponsor told her to do it and that sponsor told that sponsor to do it. And it's just from this long line of sponsors that's just the instruction. And I thought that was pretty cool. It kind of reminded me of ancestry, which, my ancestors are definitely a part of the collective of my higher power now. I think I'd like to talk a little bit about how my perception of a higher power has grown over the years, in the form of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. What my relationship with God was like was that I grew up with that getcha God that's going to get you if you don't do your homework, and that's going to get you if you tell a lie. And when I came into program and I heard the G word, I was just like, well, it's not going to be that for me. Like, I cannot have that getcha God, because I think I had an understanding that being new to sobriety, I was going to make mistakes. I was going to have resentments. I was going to slip into kind of neurotic addict behaviors. So I was willing to fire that God instantly. And I would listen in the meetings to people who seemed to have the spirituality thing down. And then I would ask them after the meeting, like what their idea of God was. And I would start borrowing that God until that God stopped working for me. So for a while I was working with the moon as my higher power. And that's still a part of my collective of my higher powers. Ancestors, like I mentioned, divine intelligence, creative intelligence. I borrow a lot of my higher power names from The Artist's Way, which was written by AA fellow named Julia Cameron. And, Spirit of the Universe, Holy Spirit of Light, masters, teachers, and loved ones, lords of the Akashic Records. I have many, many different names for it, so that if one fails, I can just move to another. But what happened was, I realized around the 2-year mark in SLA that I was still being dishonest in little areas of my life. I was still relying on human aid. I was still relying on my sponsor, relying on my meetings, relying on my fellows, and calling the fellows that I knew would co-sign my BS too, because I'm manipulative. And I was becoming obsessed with finding God, may you find God now. And I was getting really in self-pity about the fact that I hadn't found it yet. And one day I was flying home to visit my family, and I brought my big book and I flipped to a random story in the back called Freedom from Bondage. And there's a great line where it says, if you want to know how this program works, take the first word of your question. The H is for honesty, the O is for open-mindedness, and the W is for willingness. These our big book calls the essentials of recovery. And I think it's impossible for me to, find or seek, forget find, let's seek God, let's think about seeking it. Because there's action in seeking. I think find is a destination and seeking is more of a process. And the story tells me that how the program works and how I might seek God is through honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I'm having a closed mind by telling myself that I have to find God now. And that perfectionism comes out, which, to me, perfectionism is a offspring of white supremacy. We don't have to get into that, but, it is definitely very much, a character defect of mine. And what it's like now, I met a sponsor who took me through the big book of AA and had me replace drinking for thinking, because it's my thinking now that gets me drunk or high. It's my spiraling into thought that really gets me in my character defects. And we worked through the 12 steps using the big book, and she told me, you're relying on human aid too much. You're beyond human aid. You're beyond human aid. Go to God. Use the steps. And so now when people ask me what step I'm on, I'm like, I'm on all of the steps. I'm on 10, 11, and 12, really. But I'm on all of the steps constantly. I'm working 6 and 7, like every day, every minute, to be honest, because I have to, ask my higher power what it would have me do rather than doing the thing that I want to do. I want to gossip. I have to, speak well of others. I want to scroll mindlessly on social media. I should probably open a book, and like a spiritually healthy book, and, learn from that. I should probably see where Indigenous people are right. Lately, one of my new spiritual practices is every morning I read from the Daily Medicine book, which is from the Fishing Lake First Nation, Wayne S., who's a fellow in this program. And, one of my favorite ones in this book is, our spiritual growth is only as painful as our resistance to it. What it's like now, I filter my life through God rather than trying to squeeze God into areas of my life where I have time for it. I bring prayer and meditation into everything, even simple acts like stirring honey into my tea. I'll stir it clockwise towards myself and visualize that God is strengthening my honesty, my patience, my tolerance, my love, my forgiveness with every rotation. When I wash my hands, I visualize my character defects going down the drain. And instead of calling a fellow or my sponsor to, bitch and moan about my problems when I need help, I'll do some two-way prayer. I'll write out, God, I feel very afraid of commitment today, or I feel very afraid of women today, or I'm feeling resentful towards this sponsee or whatever. What is your will for me in this moment? And then I listen, I pause, I breathe, and then I let God write through me. And then I obey what that higher power says to me in two-way prayer. And sometimes it'll be something like, my higher power speaks in many different ways, depending on what my mood is. Some days it'll be like, wear some flowers in your hair and go for a walk, and, wear bright colors. And other days it's very concrete, like, read page 562, like, call this person, call that person. And great AA speaker, Peter M, I once heard him say, if a friend comes to you in meditation, like if you are meditating and you think about a person in the rooms, out of the rooms, give them a call, shoot them a text, just to see how they're doing. And I've been doing that, and I promise, like, it has so changed the game of recovery for me, because it is allowing me to be considerate of others and get out of my head and get into, helping others and just asking people genuinely how they are and genuinely caring. I have lots and lots of tips and tricks, because I have a very quick mind. I talk very fast. I think very fast. I'm impulsive, and I have a very active thought life, in and out of, recovery. And so I have lots of tactical, or not tactical, tactile, things that I can do to get higher power into my body. Like, if I'm ever holding on to a resentment that I can't let go of, the big book says that willingness, praying for the willingness. And something else that I like to do is I pick up a stone or like a piece, something, a coin, whatever you have, and just infusing that stone or coin with the energy of the thing that you're resenting or fearing or not willing to let go of. So right now I'm infusing it with impatience and I am going to physically flip it over into my other hand and then set it back down on the table, because that helps me get the motion of turning something over into my body. Another thing I like to do is, going for a walk and just talking to God, laughing with God. I probably look crazy walking around Los Angeles, giggling, but it's not, I mean, it's not that uncommon in LA, and just I'm willing to do whatever it takes to seek God now, not find. I don't think I'll ever find it, because that's so finite. That's such a, that's such an end. It's such a chapter ending. Okay, I've found God. Now what? But I think my higher power grows every day in the seeking. This morning, my little 10th and 11th step, which looks different every day, is 86 to 88. Read my daily medicine from Wayne S. Wash my face. Wash yesterday. Go down the drain. Make my drink. As I'm stirring, inviting God to strengthen me and my honesty and all of those things I mentioned before. Whispering little intentions into my drinks, lighting some candles, lighting some incense. And then I did a breathwork class. Breathwork is really special and, a good way to connect to the breath, which is, a breath is a prayer. A breath is, it helps me not dissociate. And then I checked in on some of my sponsees, and then I wrote out an outline of what I was going to say to you all today. I think I'm about done. To wrap up, I will just say, for anyone who's in any of the S fellowships and kind of struggling with the idea of well, what am I going to do? What's a dating plan? What's a good dating plan? I don't know what to do. Would I hold hands on the second date and, not kiss until date 6 and not have sex until... I don't have a dating plan. And that is because when I have aligned my will with God's will, when I'm not just thinking about God, thinking about the steps, when I'm actually doing the steps, because the big book says, here are the steps we took, not the steps we thought about, talked about with our friends, and lied about to our sponsors. When I'm actively taking the steps, specifically step 10 and 11, and, if you're new, I recommend getting a step 10 group or a step 10 buddy to, send your nightly inventories to if you're not doing that with your sponsor. And creating a container for yourself in the morning and, saying, okay, I have 15 minutes before my first work meeting of the day or my first program meeting of the day. what am I going to do in these 15 minutes that helps me connect to God? Whether it's breath work, yoga, meditation, prayer, hitting your knees. I can't physically do that. I have tendonitis, but saying the third step prayer, saying any prayer that you want, writing your own prayer, and then, folding it towards yourself and, putting it in your God box. Whatever you do in that 15 minutes, as long as it's not scrolling on, an app or, just laying in bed open-eyed and just spiraling in thought, your thought life, our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane. So yeah, my dating plan is no one comes before my relationship with God and myself. My dating plan is I'm patient. I am tolerant. Everything else is going to fall into place when my dating plan is that God is my primary. That's a polyamory joke. Anyway, so thank you so much for letting me be of service. I can't wait to hopefully answer some of your questions. And yeah, thank you so much again, Justin, for having me. It means the world to me. This program has saved my life, continues to save my life every day. And yeah, just thank God for the 12 steps. Thank God for this beautiful, powerful fellowship. And thank God for the pandemic, honestly, because I've gotten to meet people from all over the world. I took a woman in Germany through her fourth step a couple months ago. That's wild and so beautiful. So thank you for letting me share and participate in my recovery today. And yeah, God bless.
Thank you so much, Rivkah. I loved a lot of what you shared. There was so much good stuff in there. But as you closed up and you said, thank God for the pandemic, I have to heartily agree with that. As miserable as some things have been in walking through and making adjustments in pandemic, my recovery world has just exponentially grown since last year. And what a beautiful thing that has been. It's just helped me grow a ton. And thank you so much for all of your sharing. It's now time for Rivkah to answer your questions. I've received a few, and we'll get to as many as we can address in the next 20, 25 minutes as we go through this. Please remember, if you do have a question for her, type it in the Q&A link. It's two little speech bubbles over the top of each other down in the bottom of your Zoom window. The first question that came in is from one of our audience members, and he says, I have met so many sexual anorexics in SLA. I don't want that. Have you been in a relationship since becoming emotionally sober?
Yes, and I also identify as an emotional avoidant / love anorexic. From time to time, my addiction is very broad and roomy. Have I been in a relationship since getting emotionally sober? Yes. Am I still in that relationship? No. It was a struggle for a little while because when I got together with that person, I was in a place where I was fully relying on God. And then as the relationship grew and as the pandemic hit and, life went on, I started relying more on humans again. And my recovery was a little shaky. I wasn't sponsoring. That's the other thing. I wasn't being of service to other addicts. I was, folding chairs at in-person meetings and, doing Zoom tech stuff. But I wasn't sponsoring. I wasn't carrying this message one-on-one to another addict at the time. And that's because I hadn't been through the 12 steps yet. I got into the relationship on a bit of self-will, but I hadn't practiced these principles in all my affairs yet. So it was tricky, but I got out of that relationship after a while because I knew it wasn't in God's will for me to be in this relationship, which grew to be codependent. And it was hard, but every day that I'm single, I feel closer to happy, joyous, and free. Thanks for the question.
Awesome. Thank you, Rivkah. Now, the next question I'm going to combine with one that came in from our live audience with one that I wrote down. I think they combine pretty well. So the first part is, what is your morning spiritual routine? And then I'm going to follow up with how important is that routine for your recovery?
Yeah. My morning spiritual routine can look different depending on how early I wake up, because I would love to invite any of you to come to a two-way prayer meeting. I think the website for those is recoveredfrom.com or .org. Might need to fact check me on that and then drop it in the show notes after the recording. But um, yeah, two-way prayer, and I'm on the West Coast, but they're at 7 a.m. for me. So, I have to be willing to get up that early for that. I'll start my day with a little two-way prayer. Yeah. I mean, I like I said, giving yourself a container of time, whether that's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 5 minutes. I think you can do a, pretty thorough 11 step in 5 minutes if are willing to unplug the phone and just sit in silence for 5 minutes. And, um, it varies. Sometimes I'll read 86 to 88, and then I'll read this Daily Medicine or Language of Letting Go or any of our other great daily meditation books. Do a little stretch, do some silent meditation, guided meditation, chanting meditation, whatever it is. I do it all before I check my phone. I think that's the most important thing. So, having that connection with God before I connect with anybody else or anything else is really important. Maybe I'll write a letter to my inner child, and that is part of my 11th step for the morning. Maybe I'll make some, tea, drink. Oh, hydration is key too. I think, starting my day with like a giant glass of water, really important. And as I'm sipping, just expressing gratitude internally for the fact that I have clean water, because not everybody does. And that's really unfortunate. And praying for those people while I'm, sipping my water that don't have it. Yeah.
Thank you, Rivkah. You mentioned at the very beginning of your talk, you mentioned how you were half measuring it. I love the term from the big book, half measures availed us nothing, what does that mean to you? But also, how do you in your daily life strive to be aware of, hey, I think I'm stepping into half measures. I need to be all in here. How do you identify that?
Mm-hmm. Half measures to me look like many things. For example, like I mentioned, going to meetings, not using the steps, having a sponsor, lying to her, going to therapy, lying to her, I think just, to be fully honest, no half measures, see, lying is a half measure, especially when we're in recovery, knowing that honesty is indispensable when we come into these rooms, and that dishonesty is a symptom of addiction. I think there are a lot of, no half measures fueled phrases in the big book, fully concede to our innermost selves that God exists deep down. I'm butchering it. My sponsor's gonna be so mad. I don't have the book memorized, but fully concede. What does it mean to make a decision? Come to believe. Those, even within the steps, those are no half measures conditions. So yeah, like I think it's a tangent, but I think it's really funny when sponsors say in AA, like, oh, don't make any big decisions in your first year of sobriety, no dating, and like don't move, in your first year. I can honestly say I dated in my first year. I moved twice around the country, like in my first year of sobriety, and I didn't die. I'm still here. I didn't relapse. Like I am still here. And I think that's because I was so willing to make that step 3 decision. That's a pretty big freaking decision to make, is to turn your will, your thoughts, and your life, your actions over to the care and love and protection of a higher power. So, yeah.
Awesome. So my follow-up question to that, since you went in there, what would you consider to be, and I know you talked about, hey, I live in every step. I work steps 10 through 12 and 6 and 7. But as you look back and live your life in recovery, what one step seems to ring out over and over in your mind as maybe the key for you?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think it's two. I think two for me is huge because I grew up in a gaslighting family and I had a lot of gaslighting relationships. And for those of you listening who don't know, gaslighting is essentially this manipulative act of, being told your thoughts are not valid and being made to feel crazy and being made to feel like you're insane. And it's like a fun narcissistic form of lying. And it's insanely harmful. And luckily, through a thorough fourth and fifth, I've been able to look at some of that stuff and look at those patterns and whatnot. But because I was gaslit so often by others, I started gaslighting myself into thinking that I was the only person in AA that wasn't gonna get it. I was the one person that was going to work the steps and not get everything I wanted, which is so selfish and arrogant and bratty. But I have to come to believe, which is a process, not an event that just happens once. I have to come to believe on a daily basis that higher power can restore me to sanity. I think also the word restore is interesting in there because it insinuates that we have been sane at some point, which is hope, which gives me hope. And maybe that time that I was sane was like when I was just a sliver of a thought in the ether, or maybe it was like one time when I was a kid and I was playing and I was free. But I can always tether myself to that memory, whatever that was, the last time I was sane, and let myself be free in that knowledge that I can be sane again. Yeah. I think step two is the one for me.
That's very cool. And thank you for sharing that. As you shared, that wasn't the one that I thought you would come to, but man, what a beautiful thing that you can, and how you described it.
Come to?
I kind of thought step 3 might've been it, but
3 is great too. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But I love how you did that and shared with us how important step 2 was. Awesome.
Well, without step 2, there can be no step 3, right?
Right. No,
and
perfect.
And for a while I was making, I was taking my prayers and, saying, someone grant me the serenity, because I wasn't willing to say the G word yet. And something, I knew it was something that wasn't me. And I knew it wasn't something that was just like a bearded man in the sky. But I hadn't really filled in the blanks yet. And I was just so willing to get there. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right. A couple more questions. We've had a few come in here. What has been the most surprising gift of recovery for you thus far?
I have friends now. Like, I had friends in my drinking and my acting out days. A lot of them have stayed my friends and have watched me recover. Some of them have entered this program too, which is magical and beautiful. But I have friends who I trust. I think my trust has been strengthened a lot because I was a very paranoid person and anxious and, just bitter and resentful and thought that everybody was out to get Rivkah, which is, again, selfish, arrogant, bratty. But now I have friends and I have friends. And then also surprisingly, I feel perfectly fine being alone. And then another surprising gift and honestly a miracle of this recovery is that my relationship with my body has been completely restored. I suffered from grim eating disorders and, body dysmorphia, gender dysphoria. And it's a miracle that even though I'm not in the food programs, my relationship to food and my body has completely changed and become revolutionized because I always can, go to my higher power, go to that intuition, that gut drop and ask, like, what does my body need today? And that applies to food, to sleep, to rest, to exercise. And I've come to this state of not body positivity, but like neutrality. And that is a promise of the Big Book, that we are placed in a position of neutrality by God.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love the experience you shared there and the acceptance of self. through those. Those are some amazing gifts of recovery. All right, next question. What was your changing moment, if any, that made sobriety and recovery possible and realistic?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, what was your changing moment, if any, that made sobriety and recovery possible and realistic? Like a hinge pin moment that made you go, aha, this is actually possible.
I think I see it in the fellows. I when I can't see it in myself and I go to that self-pitying place of like, oh, it's never going to work for me. It's never going to land. I don't know what it is. I can do a million fourth steps and it's never going to land. But then I hear people in the rooms who I remember as newcomers, like, a person who came in with like 4 days. And then a couple months later, they're sponsoring and they're recovering. And I don't believe in recovered personally. I think it's always a process. But, I'm hearing newcomers share their miracles. And I realized that I was feeling joy for other people, which that was new. Because anytime, especially in the first couple months, hearing people being like, I'm on step 4, and I'd be like, oh, I'm not even on step 1. Like, I'm so jealous. And, hearing people share their miracles, like, oh, I'm fully self-supporting now because I've been in this program for so long. And I'm like, when's it going to be my turn? And after quite some time, I was able to feel that deep swell of like sympathetic joy or empathetic joy for other people. And that is kind of when I realized, oh, and I'll share a funny little anecdote. I I heard this like old timer share, and I think they were like, oh, if like I had a newcomer once ask me what one word they would sum this entire program in. Like if I were to sum up AA and the 12 steps in one word, what would that be? And in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's probably love, or like unity, or faith. And then this person says others. And I was just like, oh, that's okay. And that's really when it clicked for me that like, this is really like a we program, an us and others program, and we don't really get as much recovery if we're not actively working with others, and not just calling your friends like in the program, but like sponsoring. Thank you for going with me on that journey to get to that answer. I think sponsoring was the linchpin, or like that got me to this is now the 4th dimension, because I'm helping others, and that feeling of, feeling joy for other people. Yeah.
Thank you. I remember when I finished working up my steps with my sponsor, and he goes, hey, Justin, it's now time for you to sponsor somebody else. And I balked at the idea. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready about that. And he goes, well, congratulations. You just worked an 11-step program. Good luck staying sober. And it was the kick in the pants. Like, oh, wait. I need to stay sober. Well, you need to give back. Sponsoring is the key to that. Once I get to that point, absolutely. And I think my experience is even working 12 steps before getting that point is sponsoring. I need to give back. I need to get outside of my own selfish head, because man, my selfish head is a mess.
Oh yeah, it's messy and dark up there.
Mm-hmm. All right, another question that came in. How has your relationship with your fellows or sponsors changed over the course of your recovery?
Well, thank you to the friend who asked that question. My relationship with my fellows and sponsors has changed in that I'm less codependent with them. One of my best friends in the entire world was in AA a couple years before I came in. And I remember getting brunch with them before I got sober and hearing them talk about AA. And I was just like, I love that for you. I love that you have that. And I realize now that they were kind of trying to do some attraction, not promotion. And it worked. So shout out to them. M, I love you. But I remember like they were they were going through some stuff, and I started, scrambling to get them to come to meetings with me, and they just weren't coming because I wasn't allowing them to have their experience, and I was, kind of putting magical qualities on them and being like, but you're the person who brought me into this program, so you have to be perfect all the time. And you have to be, how are you gonna, how am I gonna stay sober if my, spiritual, like, mentor friend isn't on top of their game? And I'm not ready to be the kind of guru friend. And I had a lot of friendships like that, where, like, if their recovery started to waver, I'd start to distrust the program and go back to that state of like, well, if they can't do it, then I certainly can't. Like, after quite some time and working with my sponsor in SLA, who's amazing, and looking at the chapter to wives, and replacing all of the, like, kind of gross gendered language with, like, friend, fellow, sponsee, sponsor, self, whatever it is, family, people, your people, and putting myself in that chapter and realizing how terribly codependent I was, it revolutionized that chapter for me. It helped me not resent it as much. And also it just helps me know that everything is as it should be. So, and we're not always going to be having a great day on the same day. And that's really where that, like, thread of unity that keeps this program going has to come through. And also being willing to take a step back when I start to feel myself reacting, and when I start to feel myself trying to mother my friends and fellows and sponsors and sponsees. The other thing that has changed my relationship with my sponsors and sponsees is knowing that they don't owe me anything. Like, we're doing this for free, which is pretty rad. And I had a resentment against an old sponsor who was like, leave me a voice memo every day for 30 days. And I'm like, can we work the steps? And like, she was like, no, not yet. And I do think that was kind of messed up, but, like, in my mind, I got into that entitled state of like, how dare you? Like, I'm going to die without this. And it's like, no, like, I think actually what she was trying to get me to do was pause and, like, go, say things out loud so I didn't keep any secrets. And it was a very sneaky way of, like, getting me to trust the program. So I actually am grateful for that sponsor that did that, even though it ended up not working out. But just knowing that sponsors, sponsees, fellows, newcomers, etc., like, even though I love them all in a very special way, they're all human. We're all human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to, say things that, like, don't feel great to each other sometimes. And, it's a great way to practice boundaries and practice these principles and the traditions, So, yeah.
Awesome. And I think we got time for one more question before we go into the wrap-up segment here. And I'll read this one question here. What part of the step process blew your mind?
I think, oh God, all of it. It's so beautiful. I think my first kind of glimpse at a spiritual awakening happened when I did my first fifth step with my AA sponsor. And I just recently did my second fifth step with my AA sponsor, which was really nice. And I had a similar experience again, where I was so afraid to say these things to somebody. And even though I love my sponsor and trust her, and want what she has, I was just like, oh, God, like, I am going to be the only sponsee she's ever had who has done this thing. That terminal uniqueness, that thinking I'm special, And then I said the one thing that I was, like, super embarrassed about. And she was just like, I did that too. And I was just like, no way. Like, and it let me drop that magical quality that I had signed her as this, like, perfect Miss AA, like, queen of recovery. And it helped me see her as human. That really blew my mind. And I let these steps and this program blow my mind on a regular basis. I am open to receiving miracles, and I'm open to letting higher power and the universe and my ancestors who love me so much just show off for me. I let God show off for me, whether that's in nature, in my tarot cards, in something my fellow says that I have been thinking and now it's out there. I love letting God show off for me. And it's so beautiful to get to that place of just being grateful and like walking around living in gratitude. I acknowledge that not every day is going to be, a gratitude fest and like me like screaming the big book at people. There are some days where I need to cry, need to rest, need to feel my feelings. Because I think there's a common thing that happens when, at least when I see it happen with newcomers, especially in the Big Book Slaw Fellowship, where they work the steps and they start sponsoring, and then they start hiding behind this, and they're just like, like a walking, talking big book. And they start to dissociate from their feelings. And I think it's important that we honor our feelings while not getting swept up into them, and using things like God, the steps program, the big book, sure, as a surfboard to like be able to ride the waves of our emotions rather than drowning in the emotions. And also not avoiding the waves at all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rivkah. Before we go into the closing spiel here, do you have any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with us?
Keep coming back. I know it's so cheesy. The slogans are so cheesy, but I love an acronym. I have so many fun ones. My favorite one that I've heard recently was for PAUSE. PAUSE stands for postpone action until spirit enters. It's a pretty good one. I really like nuts. When somebody asks me how I am, if I say I'm nuts, that means I'm not using the steps. Shout out to Naika, who told me that one, who's here, which I love. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Even if you've got 40 years sober, don't be afraid to ask for help. I promise, you're not going to seem weak. You're not going to seem like you're not using the steps. You're not going to seem like a liar if you ask for help. In fact, it helps me to see folks that are, older in their sobriety, asking for help. It helps me to see my sponsor being human, because it helps me see her as human and not as, this beacon of recovery and this walking, big book. It helps me a lot to see old timers, newcomers, et cetera, ask for help. And one final little anecdote that I really love to share. I love nature. I went up to Big Bear for my birthday a couple months ago with some fellows, and I woke up super early to watch the sunrise. Watch the sunrise. It's such a beautiful thing. And as you see the sun hit the first building or first tree, just watch how amazing it is to watch it pan out and hit more trees and more trees. And then it finally will get to you and shine its light on you. And that is how I feel about seeing miracles happen for my friends in this program. I see the newcomer, take a 30-day chip. And then I see a couple friends in program, get into these beautiful, healthy relationships or get a job of their wildest dreams. And rather than thinking, when's it going to happen for me? When am I going to enter the fourth dimension? When am I going to get the miracles? Can you know that the sun is going to shine its light on you, and just trust that and be patient? Thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much, Rivkah. That was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have other questions, please go to www.rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that will come up there. I invite the audience to keep coming back. Come back next week. We have a great speaker. His name is Jeremy, and he's going to just follow up on this amazing talk also with just continuing this momentum that's been going on now for 42 meetings. Looking forward to another 42 and beyond there. If you've not yet gone to rico12.com and submitted your email address, please get on the invitation list so that you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. And now we are going to close this out. Rivkah has elected to have us launch off into the rest of our day with the step 3 prayer. Go ahead, Rivkah, it's yours.
Thank you. You can follow along on page 63 of the Big Book, and we'll take a quick moment of silence for the addicts and the folks that are still suffering in and out of these Zooms. We'll take that moment now. Creators, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I might better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rivkah. Everybody keep coming back. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it.
Fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of